Hey friends, welcome back to another video. My name's Emma Lefebvre and this is Miles. Miles, this is your first actual intro with me. Hooray! So today I'm going to be doing something different. I am going to be doing 4 of the same painting, but with 4 different mediums. This could either go really well or really bad, but we're going to go and find out. So let's jump right in and start. Okay, so today we are doing a fun video. Hopefully this doesn't frustrate me too much, but something I've never done before. I'm going to be painting 4 versions of the same painting using 4 different mediums. I'm going to be using watercolor, gouache, oil pastels, then soft pastels. So if you guys know me, you know I'm kind of the most comfortable with watercolor. Gouache may be secondary. Oil pastels and soft pastels, not my jam. But we are going to give it a try today, so I'm going to do a simple landscape to hopefully get me into it. Now for these paintings or drawings, I'm using my Etcher Lab Cold Press Watercolor Sketchbook for the 2 wet mediums. I'm going to be using my Paul Rubens watercolors for this because the majority of the supplies are from Paul Rubens, so I thought I'd use their watercolors. I will be using my Himi gouache for the gouache portion. For the oil pastels and soft pastels, I just got these from Paul Rubens. Kind of played with it a little bit, but I literally have no idea what I'm doing with these soft pastels. And then I did do one tutorial on the oil pastels. So these are the products that I'm using today, and we will see how this goes. I'm quite nervous about these because when I did play with them, they were not easy to use, and they are quite messy, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but we're going to give it a try and see what all the different mediums look like side by side with the same painting. So let's jump in and start with watercolor. Okay, so watercolor, this is my jam. This is what I am the most confident in and what I am most comfortable working with, just because I know how it works. I've been doing this forever, right? So as for skies that have multiple different colors, I find it's super easy to blend with because when you do the wet on wet technique, you get this beautiful seamless blend. The trick with this is you just have to keep it all wet so it blends seamlessly, because once one part starts to dry and another part is a little bit more wet, you can get those kind of funky marks. So I did our sky and then I dried it, as you saw, with my little hand dryer thing, heat tool, and now I'm just doing the foreground, which is just going to be like shadowy mountains and trees. I tried adding some lightness there, so maybe it looks like water or something. I was just kind of winging all of this, so I didn't really have a vision to start with, and I just kind of played around. But that was kind of it. So doing small detailed trees, super easy with the shape of the brush, so easy to apply, and I found this super easy to work with. I can just keep saying easy, easy, easy over and over again. Okay, so now gouache. Gouache is a tricky medium for me. I don't know why. It's similar to watercolor, but I find it so hard to blend, and I'm still trying to figure out the best way to do this. So I wanted to try and match the colors exactly, but as you can see, they're quite a lot darker than the watercolor, and I wanted to lighten them up again. So you'll see that I add some white because it just looked really streaky and too vibrant. So I really had to play around with this. I do find gouache a little tricky to work with, to be honest, and it does frustrate me because I really want to be good at it. But like anything, it's going to take time. Watercolor wasn't easy at the beginning, so gouache isn't going to be either. The one thing I forget is that like once you touch like a blue part at the top, like there, you bring it down, it's still blue. So you really have to wash your brush off in between. Overall, the sky ended up looking okay. With this one, the blending wasn't as easy, but it looked kind of cool. There was a bit more texture to it. And as you can tell, it's a bit more vibrant than the watercolor. Watercolor, I keep forgetting, not keep forgetting, but I do know that it dries lighter. So you might want to add another layer on a watercolor sky to make it a bit more vibrant, because it will end up looking a lot less vibrant. I'm so good with words today. So that was my gouache experience. After comparing the two, I did see that I wanted to make the foreground in the watercolor a bit darker, so I went back and I did that. I feel like I should have made the sky a bit more vibrant too, but it's all good. So that is those two. You can see I just keep kind of tweaking to make them look more similar. Um, it wasn't really working out the way I wanted it, but it's fine. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the oil pastels. And the oil pastels are, they're super tricky. So the first thing I did was tape it down, as you see, and then I picked out my colors. I've used these maybe twice before. Was not too unsuccessful, but not too successful either. This is something I really have to work at. And as you can see on the right hand side, I got out some blending stumps to help me blend the pastels together. So the way I see it, like these pastels almost kind of remind me of like sculpting almost, because they're like kneadable. Does that make sense? But yeah, and always starting out, I find it looks like awful. Like, look at that. Like trying to lay down those colors, there you start off and there's like, oh my god, there's no hope for this. This is going to be awful. But with some more blending, I didn't really use too much of the blending stump. I just ended up using my finger because the heat from your skin will help it blend a lot better. The only thing with that is that, one, your fingers can start to hurt, and two, you really got to use a different finger for each color, because if you go back over the yellow with your blue finger, it's gonna, smush together. So you really had to use all hands on deck or all fingers on deck. And then I got out a palette knife to see if that would work. Didn't work very well. I don't know. Trying to experiment. The one thing that kind of drove me nuts about this one was I was trying to get it to be a bit more vibrant yellow at the bottom. And I felt it really hard to layer on top. Maybe I just had too much of a layer underneath of the white, and it just, every time I kept trying to layer something on top, it would just scratch into it and take the oil pastel off. So I might have used too much to begin with. But overall, I mean, it ended up looking pretty cool. One thing I do love about the oil pastels is it looks like an oil painting. Like I just slapped some oil paint on there and it gives it this like incredible texture, which is really cool. It is a little frustrating to work with if you don't know how to work with it, aka I don't know how to work with it. Ooh, but here I started using the palette knife for the trees, which was inventive of me, because again, the oil pastels don't have like a sharp tip to work with. So I had to figure out a way to get tiny little lines on there. And that was my experience with that. Okay, and so now lastly, the soft pastels. These are interesting. I have never worked with these before, but as you can see there, like I laid down the pink and it wasn't blending as well. I just found that like it was hard to get the color into the paper and it just kept moving the dust around. So I added white to hopefully blend it a bit better. But again, the thing with the fingers, you got to use a different finger for each color. Also, you have to see where the dust is kind of flying, because if you have like blue dust that makes its way down to the yellow and you smudge your finger, you're going to have like a greeny streak there. It's very tricky to work with, and there's a lot of dust that just goes everywhere. You'll see my desk after. It's nuts. But I definitely found this was the hardest to blend because of that dust issue, and I found like the color was not necessarily soaking in as well. So, not soaking in because it's not wet, but you know what I mean, right? Like I'm moving it around and I couldn't figure it out. So this is something I'll have to play around with more. This is my first time using them. So it didn't go too bad, but yeah, I kept trying to go back and, fix that sky, and it wasn't working. So now we are going to, oh, and there I'm trying to shake off the dust. Look at my desk. Just a mess. All right, so now let's take a look at all of them together after taking off the tape and give them a little bit of a comparison. Okay, so here are all 4 pieces. That was quite eye-opening to do. As for my favorite to work with, definitely watercolor, but I think that's just because I am the most comfortable and confident with watercolor. I know how it works. I know how I can get it to do what I want, while the other ones, I was kind of figuring it out as I went along. Even with the gouache, you saw how I started. Like, I've done a couple of gouache tutorials, but it's definitely still not my forte of like painting. I don't know the best way to go about things. So the sky at the beginning was just, I don't know if I should have started blending it or adding the white to the colors to make it lighter to begin with, or the way I did it where I put down the darker colors first and then I added white on top. I don't know where I was going. Anyway, it ended up working out the way I wanted it to, but I still wasn't as confident and as sure as I was with watercolor. Again, just because it's what I work with. Now, as for these two mediums, okay, so the colors are really intense, which are incredible. So I'm like looking at all of these and I feel like the watercolor one is probably the most underwhelming, and maybe not my favorite to look at. Maybe it's something that I could have done like another layer in the sky to make those colors more intense. Sometimes because watercolor, when it dries lighter. You do need to do maybe a couple layers to intensify those sky colors, which I've done in the past. I just didn't do it this time. But compared to these, and because I did it first, I didn't really think to do it again. It's completely, underwhelming. It's not as vibrant and as light. So I do love the texture of watercolor. I love how the blends are very, very soft. They're probably the softest blends of everything, but the color vibrancy is definitely the least vibrant. As for these two, I have to say that working with the oil pastels, both of them were quite frustrating. I'm gonna say, maybe it's just because I wasn't doing it right, or I just am not as familiar. But the oil pastel one, I think almost looks to be my favorite of all of them, just because it looks kind of like an oil painting, like that sky. I feel like oil pastels for skies are amazing. But it did take a lot of blending on my part and trying to figure out. And the thing I found very difficult with the oil pastels was trying to layer colors on top, because I feel like if I had too much of an oil pastel on the paper, if I added more, it would just kind of take up what was underneath. So I don't know if you're supposed to do like a thin layer to start and then maybe add thicker layers on top. I have no idea. No idea how to work with them. It ended up working out, but it was very tricky. And also trying to get small little tree lines was very difficult too, because it was like blending into the sky and it wasn't as dark as I liked it. That's when I used that palette knife, which kind of worked, but didn't. I don't know. Might be something I have to play around with. But yeah, trying to get those little tiny lines, because once you use the oil pastels, you don't have those sharpened edges anymore. So that was very tricky. The soft pastels, while the color's intense, I found this the most difficult to blend and probably my least favorite to work with. I'm not familiar with it. It's extremely messy, and don't get me wrong, I don't mind a mess, but I don't love a mess. Like, my hands were just coated. My desk is still coated. I'm gonna have to do a clean after this, and it's quite frustrating. But yeah, blending was very, very difficult with the soft pastels, because as you can see, it's just probably the least blended. I tried to add white to maybe get it to blend better, but you'd get little bits of black in there just from the dust flying everywhere, and then that would blend in, and it's not as nice to look at. It's very tricky, because once you lay that color down, there's so much excess dust from the colors, so you kind of have to worry about where it's going. Like if you even just look at the side after taking off the tape, it's just everywhere. So least favorite, definitely. I don't know how, like, I've seen people work with soft pastels and create these incredible masterpieces. No idea how they do it. Zero idea. Definitely the most difficult to work with. The oil pastels may have been the most fun, because it's kind of working with like almost like sculpting, because you can, like, I don't know if you guys noticed, I was like twirling the oil pastel to get a big chunk of it off and then blending it with my finger. It almost felt like I was working with like plasticine or something, which was pretty cool. So that was fun as a newer medium to work with. And then lastly, gouache. Gouache, like I said, I'm still figuring out. I don't know. I'm kind of all over the place with this. It was a fun exercise. They all turned out really well. They all turned out really different. I love the vibrancy of these two. Wish I went a little bit more vibrant on this one, but yeah, I don't know. Those are just kind of my random thoughts. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below of how you think I did. Be kind, because these are not, my specialties of working with it. And the one that I'm the most confident with is probably the most underwhelming. So yeah, I don't know. It's something that I'll have to practice, but it was still a lot of fun and I got some cool paintings out of them. So yeah. Okay, so I quickly just wanted to show you that I ended up going back into my watercolor painting and just going over it with another layer for the sky to make it more vibrant. It ended up working well and matching a lot better, so that kind of fixed that little issue for me, and that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you liked it and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on Instagram for even more. Have a great day, guys. Bye. Are you gonna say bye? No? Okay. Bye. Can we just take a look at this desk for a second? This is what I'm left with after those soft pastels. Cover your work surface. I'm gonna go clean it now. Okay, bye.